The only thing Midnight Coup can't do is get you laid, but for everything else there is a role for that. Midnight Coup makes a return with the Brave Arsenal with a vengeance, and my goodness, does this thing deliver on every front imaginable. All it takes is one simple cursory glance at the perks on offer to let you know that what we have here is something very special indeed. The classic Outlaw Rampage perk, Firefly Rampage, Firefly Kinetic Tremors, Explosive Payload 1 for All, Zen Moment Moving Target, and the list goes on. There are so many unique perk combinations here that I don't really believe that there's a single PvE god roll, because really, what this gun is offering is the choice for you to make up your mind as to what you want out of the weapon. And there's something very few weapons in this game actually offer the player. And when you combine all of that with the sublime acoustics, the incredible mechanical feel, and the oh so satisfying sound of popping a headshot, we've got a bona fide superstar in our hands. Let's talk about that feel of the handgun, shall we? Now, for a lot of you who did not play Destiny 2 in year one, this was the primary. This was the hand cannon. It had Outlaw and Ambitious Assassin paired with Rampage. That was it. We had 3 perks, 2 of which were selectable. It was a time, and we loved it. It was basically the only kinetic slot primary people ran for ages. And when I got that same role, Outlaw Rampage, and I gave this a whirl for the first time, nothing has really changed for the better. It's still got that very unique sound, that very unique sensation of firing, and it still kicks like a mule. Oh my goodness. If you're not familiar, if you have no frame of reference, you're not gonna like Midnight Coup straight away. You're gonna feel it's kind of weird. And then, as you play more and more, you get used to it, you get used to the particularities of the weapon, and you start to lean in to what this gun is asking you to do, which is to get closer and be aggressive. Because this is a 150 RPM hand cannon. Back in the day, Midnight Coup was just like spare rations. It was a lightweight 150 RPM. But there's no such thing as a lightweight 150 RPM hand cannon anymore, so now it's an adaptive, which means that you're trading range and stability for added reload speed and handling. That means this is a gun that is designed to get down and dirty, right in the thick of it. And on that front, I'm happy to report that it can do everything you need it to do, and so much more. Thanks to the 150 RPM handling and reload speed, I'm going to put in quotes 150 RPM, it's 60 and 56 at base. That means it's higher than your standard adaptive 140, and it pays off. At no point during any of my testing did I feel like I couldn't reload quick enough or swap away fast enough. It's the correct choice considering the stats of this weapon and the fact that this definitely feels like it was designed to be an ad clear weapon. And as a result, it can more than do the job in Onslaught and Legend Onslaught and any enemy dense content that you want. Plus, it's really good for the season with the Unstoppable Hand Cannon mod. Also, not to mention the 15% extra damage that you would get just by virtue of it being kinetic over some of the other elemental options. Overall, I really enjoyed my time using this gun in PvE. If you're just coming back to the game, hand cannons actually now finally feel great in PvE. And we've got a high handling, high reload speed, decent stability and range example here that just does the business. By itself, it's not anything spectacular, but certain perks and certain roles elevate it to an experience where you have to go for this weapon. It's a no-brainer. I do believe that because of the experiences on offer here, this should be firmly on your shopping list when it comes to grinding for these weapons. Right, let's talk roles. Here we are in D2 Foundry, and in column 3 we have Outlaw, Firefly, Shoot to Loot, Explosive Payload, Moving Target, Attrition Orbs, Enlighten Action. On column 4 we have Rampage, Kinetic Tremors, Zen Moment, One for All, Frenzy, Opening Shot, and Discipline Measures. I'm going to tell you one perk that you should absolutely shard as soon as you see. Outlaw. Outlaw is fine, it maxes out your reload when you get a precision kill. However, Firefly does the same thing, but it's more fun and gives kaboom. So you get max reload from kaboom with precision hit, which is more fun. Also, Attrition Orbs. I'm not really sure what the point of this perk is. I don't think that this is something that makes sense for anything other than a DPS weapon, because if you're standing there shooting something with a primary weapon, there's only one of two realities that we're facing here. One, you've ran out of ammo with your special and heavy options, and fair enough, do what you can. Or two, you need a psych eval. In column 4, I genuinely do not know which of these perks is the worst here. I don't think there is a bad perk. Rampage, for example, 33.10% increased damage just from 3 kills. That's a significant damage boost, and it makes this like the default ad clearing roll. Firefly, Rampage, there you go. That is basically Outlaw Rampage, the classic roll, but better in every way. Kinetic Tremors, So kinetic tremors, I think a lot of people are really interested in. I personally am not a fan because it requires 6 hand cannon shots to actually proc, which is a lot of shots and it takes a long time to actually proc that. But there's no denying that it can help for certain situations and tankier enemies, plus it has a useful AoE, so I'm not going to discount the notion at all. When you consider the other weapons that have kinetic tremors and what it takes for them to proc it, submachine guns need 14. You can get 14 crits on most submachine guns like that. Auto rifles, 12 hits. Pretty much the same. Pulse rifles, depends on the archetype, but again, much faster. Non-burst sidearms, quicker. Hand cannons and scout rifles. With scout rifles, you're more willing to accept the 6 hits because A, you're further back, and B, generally speaking, most of them fire faster than 140 RPM anyhow. It's a combination of the fact that this is a 140 RPM hand cannon, it's mid-range, you know, you want to be in the thick of things, you want to make things happen instead of continually firing and waiting for something to happen. So for that reason, I'm not the biggest fan of kinetic tremors, though I do see a very good use case in GMs, potentially. Zen Moment. Now, I think Zen Moment is very much more for PvP, and from a PvE perspective, I think this is a wasted perk, absolutely. Then we have One For All, which I think, quite honestly, might be the best perk in this column. Hitting 3 separate targets increase damage for a moderate duration. That is, you just have to hit them. You don't have to kill them, you just have to hit them. You hit 3 separate targets, you will get 35% increased damage for 10 seconds, and then you reproc that over and over again. That is better than Rampage's 33.10. Not by much, but it's better, objectively. The difference is, obviously, that One For All is on a timer, and Rampage can be continued as long as there's enemies around. So again, it's just personal preference. On the same note, Desperate Measures, again, can go all the way up to 30%. So we have 30%, 33%, 35%. Desperate Measures, like Rampage, can be refreshed until the cows come home. You just need to keep the killing going. Now, in what scenario would you go for Desperate Measures over Rampage? Well, normally you wouldn't. However, if you have a build, or you like to build, that involves a lot of use of grenades, or melee abilities, or whatever the case may be, this might be the perk you want. Because if your primary gameplay loop is to get your abilities going, and to keep them going, then having a gun that can just whip out 30% extra damage on command is kinda neat. So if you're a build crafter, I can fully see the appeal of going for Desperate Measures over Rampage, because the only way to get Rampage is to kill with a weapon. That could be your build crafter's favor right there. There is a case for all of this. Opening shot, okay, I take it back. This is the worst perk for PvE, because why? Literally why? Frenzy, again, nothing wrong with this. Be wary of double stacking with Firefly though, because, you know, they're both reload perks at the end of the day. I think there's nothing wrong with Frenzy, 15%. Very good perk, especially if you're in the thick of it for a long time. You pair that with something like Explosive Payload, and you're laughing. The fundamental thing is, you have to decide for yourself, what do you want out of this weapon? What are you going to use it for? Now, I've made the argument that this is an ad clear weapon. It's a kinetic hand cannon. That's what it's used for. That's what kinetic hand cannons have always been used for. Spec into that. For me personally, because I know that this is going to be my go-to hand cannon, my Fatebringer, my new Fatebringer essentially, I want it to be good in everything. I want it to be good in GMs, I want it to be good in Day 1 raiding, I want it to be good in Neo Muna patrols, I want it to be good in freaking normal onslaught, I want it to be good everywhere I go. And I want it to be good with the least amount of effort possible. So, my role is going to be Firefly and One For All. Firefly for the reload speed and One For All for the 35% boost. In terms of the magazine, I'm going to go with appended mag because I get 14 in the mag, which will give me 1 or 2 extra bullets to make use of One For All without having to waste time reloading. And for my barrel, I'm going to go fluted. It has to be fluted. Anything to boost handling and stability is music to my ears when it comes to PvE. I don't really much care for range in PvE, not really. And again with these stats, I'll probably lean into stability as well. Range, if I get a range roll, sure, I'm not going to complain, but I would much prefer a stability or a handling masterwork there. Put a major spec mod to wrap it all up. But you may be asking me, how does Midnight Coup fare against its competition? But the real answer comes when you look at Fatebringer and Midnight Coup side by side. So let's have a look, shall we? These are the perks for Midnight Coup on your left, and on the right we have Fatebringer. With Fatebringer we have Rewind Rounds, Killing Wind, Tunnel Vision, Osmosis, Thresh, and Explosive Payload, Eye of the Storm, Kill Clip, Frenzy, Opening Shot, Adrenaline Junkie, and Firefly. Like, yes, you could do the PvE thing with Explosive Payload and Opening Shot. You could do the classic Destiny 1 thing with Explosive Payload and Firefly. You could also do really off-kilter type build things with Osmosis and Adrenaline Junkie. At the time, Fatebringer was considered the best of both worlds. It was considered one of the premier hand cannons for those who wanted a one gun that could do it all. And in many respects it still is, although if you wanted a pure PvP hand cannon, Rose exists, Ostringer exists, and that's craftable. Midnight Coup has come here to remind you that there is value in having that perfect hand cannon. And when you look at the perks side by side and what they're offering, you can't help but say that Midnight Coup just does it better. You want easy ad clear at Firefly Rampage, you want more difficult ad clear at Firefly One for All, you want funny ad clear, you have Explosive Payload Frenzy, you want build crafting ad clear, you have Enlightened Action Desperate Measures. Like, this seems like Fatebringer for 2024. And I think because of the perks on offer here, because of the overall stat package and the feel, this clears Fatebringer. This clears it. Now, let's talk about PvP. PvP, I found this to be a little bit of an interestingly mixed bag, because there is serious potential here. However, it is being hamstrung by the fact that it is a converted 150, and the fact that it has less range and less stats than some of its more established competition, both in terms of range and stability. Two of the most important stats for any hand cannon in PvP. Now, before I talk about my own experiences, I just want to remind you of the fact that Midnight Coup is down on range and stability compared to most of the other hand cannons. The only one that it beats is Spare Rations for its range. But it's interesting when you look at the stats here, range-wise, it sort of sits in between what we would traditionally know as a classic 150 converted to 140 and a modern 140 adaptive. I mean, Rose is your 150 and that's got fairly juiced stats. In fact, the stability handling is identical to Rose and it's only down by 3 in terms of range. So realistically, this shouldn't feel all that much different. However, Rose is a lightweight and this is just an adaptive. Now again, your mileage may vary. It will depend on the rolls that you have. It also depends on how you play the game. But personally, I found it very, very difficult to get to grips with Midnight Coup because I was using it like I would use some of my other hand cannons. If you're like me and you got used to 120 RPMs over the last 6 months or so, using Midnight Coup is going to feel like a culture shock. You're going to feel like it has no range. You're going to feel like it can't duel. You're going to feel like you can't really do anything with this weapon. And then you'll start noticing other things that'll just annoy you about the weapon, like maybe the sound is a bit too tinny, or the recoil is too bouncy, and the model gets in the way too much. But believe me when I say that all of these issues can be solved by two things: a slight adjustment in playstyle and the right perks. Now yes, Midnight Coup is down in range, that is objectively correct. However, what happens when you spec for maximum range? Let's say we go Hammerforged rifling, let's say we go Accurized rounds. Let's say we do Explosive Payload for the crazy drop-off, and then we do Opening Shot, and we put that there. We turn on that added value for the first shot. Then we put a Range Masterwork. Suddenly we have 95 range. Out of nowhere. And that gives us a range of 36.82 meters, which is good enough to duel most pulse rifles and hand cannons. Again, this is one of the things about this weapon that I really want you to understand. This is a pick-your-own-adventure type of book. You have to decide what you want out of this hand cannon, and it will give it to you. Do you want a mid-range monster? Well, there's your roll. Hammerforged, Accurized, Explosive Payload, and Opening Shot. Hell, go Extended Barrel if you don't care about the handling hit and you want a little bit slightly better recoil direction. Sure, do that. Or if you want to be a consistent dueler, you want to win your ones, you want to have the most consistency in your shot, you want to use this in threes, then you may be tempted by Moving Target and Zen Moment. And then you give yourself Small Bore. That covers a decent chunk of range, but not compromising the stability too much so you can still actually duel. Although with Zen Moment, you don't really need to worry about stability too much because it does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So you're free to spec into something else, but you know, just for consistency's sake, just for balance, you decide to go for Small Bore or even Hammerforge. Screw it, let's say Hammerforge. Now you're at 33 meters. That'll cover most mid-range fights. You'll definitely feel the sting of 120s shooting further away from you, or even the odd Ostringer or two that pops up and decides to beam you from like 2 extra meters away. Or maybe you want to be a running gunner. You want to be hyper aggressive. You want to do as much damage as you can. You want to make the opponent's lives hells. In which case you have Explosive Payload, potentially Desperate Measures if you want to get a kill from that, you get a little damage boost. You could do Opening Shot too. You could do Frenzy if you're into that sort of playstyle. You can keep yourself alive. If your name is Kami Cakes, Frenzy is there for you. There you go, bud. Or maybe you just want good old-fashioned Zen Moment, but Explosive Payload will basically make everybody's lives hell. And it'll make it hard for them to duel against you. Although I will say one thing, if you don't have explosive payload, you'll do 81 to the head as standard. With Zen Moment, just the way they split the damage and how they've changed numbers lately, it's now 78 to the head. Now, there's also a little bit of a myth going around that explosive payload, because it counts as 2 hits, it will proc kinetic tremors a little bit sooner. That's not the case at all. I'll link a video down below by Hinra, who completely dispels this myth, so it won't proc that, and it won't double proc Zen Moment either. And now, having used this extensively over the last 24 hours or so, I'm pretty confident in saying that if you have a problem with Midnight Coup in PvP, it may be more down to the fact that you might not have enough range, more than anything else. And your stats might be a little bit all over the place. That might not necessarily be in line with what you're expecting your hand cannon to be. It may not gel with your playstyle. I suspect for the vast majority of you watching, you're going to want to go for that rangy playstyle. You're going to want to have as much range on hand, especially when there's so many auto rifles and 120s around, and pulse rifles now too. Hell, even other Midnight Coups. This is going to be flavor of the month for a little while, and you probably want to give yourself a little bit of an advantage over those guys, so go for range. So with all that being said, what would be my personal god roll? Now, I am a rangy boy, I'm a pulse rifle main, I like range. So this is what I'm going to go for. I'm going to go for a range masterwork, first and foremost. I'm going to go with Hammerforge rifling. I'm tempted to go with full bore, because I can take the hit to handling, -5 is not a big deal. Stability is a bit too much of a harsh price for me to pay. I'm also pairing this with Zen Moment. Zen Moment's the second perk I'm going to go for in my dueling performance. But let's just say, for argument's sake, just so the stats are pretty, we say Hammerforge rifling. We don't take any penalties. Accurized rounds, obviously, for the second column. Third column is between explosive payload, moving target, and enlightened action. Now, I have a shiny which has Zen Moment, enlightened action, and moving target. I found that when I put any sort of damage on, I basically maxed out my handling and reload speed every single time, because enlightened action gives you 3 stacks for hand cannons per hit. So obviously you need to 3-tap, so that's 3 hits. That'll give you 9 total for enlightened action, but it maxes out at 5. And that's a really good feeling. It feels like, okay, I've killed this person, now I can get back into the fight quickly, I just reload and then keep going. But the difference between enlightened action and moving target was the difference between me hitting more shots and me hitting less. Because I will fully admit that I'm not the best player out there. I'm not the crispiest hand cannon user in the world. I don't have crispy aim. I barely get by. Moving target, I like it. It really helps. It dials the aim assist up to 100, and it works. It's so good. I don't know if it was placebo or if it was just the difference between 90 and 100 is so great, but I performed better with moving target and Zen Moment. So for me, I'm still waiting on an explosive payload roll. I will be comparing between explosive payload and moving target with Zen Moment. Zen Moment to me is by far and away the perk that I think is going to help me and my playstyle the most. Don't discount opening shot, because in certain situations, like in trials, where getting the first shot off is very important, this is going to be killer. And then you have explosive payload on top of that. Will be a really interesting role to test out in the future. But for now, for general 6s, I'm going to go with moving target and Zen Moment. Now, how does Midnight Coup fare against the competition? What's the competition? For me, it's 2 weapons, Austringer and Rose. More so Rose than anything else, because Rose has been the non-exotic kinetic favorite for quite some time. So I've built out a couple of rolls here: Hammerforge, Ricochet, Eye of the Storm, and Zen Moment on Austringer. And on Rose, I went with Slide Shot, Eye of the Storm with a polymer grip for added handling. Midnight Coup is favoring very well against Austringer, which, as we said before, is one of the best, most rangiest hand cannons out there. Rose is down a little bit, but with Slide Shot, if you go to Slide Shot here and you turn that on, your range starts to surpass the other 2. So once you slide, you get 20 extra range, which is really handy for that first shot. That, in fact, that's more than any of them combined. In fact, that's 35.2 meters. If we go to Austringer, that's 33 meters. So yeah, with Slide Shot active and giving those benefits, Rose is clearing these 2. Stability. Midnight Coup stuck at 45, although Zen Moment does do a lot of heavy lifting, but Austringer's high base of 69 makes this thing feel very hard to mess with. Very easy to control weapon. Zen Moment, I'm pretty sure maxes it out. I don't know the actual numerical figures of that. And then Rose is the worst with 45, although again, with Slide Shot, you get a chunk of stability. That brings it up to 75, and that makes it well above Austringer. Reload speed, much of muchness between Midnight Coup and Rose. Aim assistance, 90 goes to Midnight Coup, although Midnight Coup technically has 100. I completely forgot. Eye of the Storm, boost the handling up to 100. So, in the handling department, yeah, Rose wins even more. Even Austringer with Eye of the Storm will only get to 77. Despite the best efforts of Midnight Coup, you have to say, aside from Mag size, aside from airborne effectiveness, aside from aim assistance, Ostringer and Rose are still better, statistically, on paper. But when it comes to the feel of the weapon is so subjective. The feel is everything for a PvP player. I mean, for heaven's sake, people were rocking this for so long. Kept confidence, quick draw, Eye of the Storm. Why? Because it's craftable, and 2, it just felt really, really good. Is it a good weapon? No, it isn't. But it was everywhere for a long time because it was different and it felt great. And in PvP, stats of a weapon are just one part of the puzzle. The most important part of deciding what weapon to use is how much you vibe with the weapon. And on that front, I think Midnight Coup offers something that Ostringer and Rose doesn't. It offers personality. Ostringer is way too perfect and way too beefy. Rose, to my, untrained hands, sometimes feels a bit hollow. But Midnight Coup just has the right balance of everything, and this is really hard to explain, and it's hard for me to sit here and tell you that Midnight Coup is better because of feel. No, that's not what I'm trying to say at all. I'm just saying that even though Midnight Coup is beat by Rose and Ostringer, it might be worth your time anyways, just based on how it feels. And if it feels good to you and you get good performance out of it as a result, if you fight this gun less than you fight the other two to get the maximum out of it, then that makes it best in slot. So, overall conclusion. Is the Midnight Coup any good? Yeah, I think so. As far as kinetic hand cannons go, it is very clearly best in slot for PvE. In terms of PvP, it's not as clear cut. It is definitely top 3 kinetic. Is it top 3 generally? Don't know. But what Midnight Coup has that the others don't, in both PvE and PvP, is that it has everything that you possibly want. It is a true pick your own adventure of a weapon. All you need to do to get the best out of it is to ask yourself honestly, what do I want from this weapon? What do I want my hand cannon to be? And if you can answer that honestly and clearly and adhere to the playstyle that role will demand of you, then you will find that the Midnight Coup is the best hand cannon that has ever been released in Destiny 2. And that's saying something. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. I'm sorry if this is a little bit longer. I really want to slow it down, get my thoughts in order, getting used to the style, all the rest of that. I hope you understand. I'll try and get you guys a Mountaintop review this week, but I am traveling tomorrow to Canada to go to a friend's wedding, so might not happen, but stay tuned and it will be more like this style as well. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Ascendant Nomad, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.